Okay, let me go back to okay, here we go. So poetry therapy, uses with body-focused repetitive behaviors. By the way, I am Laura Santner. I am a clinical social worker. I am also a registered poetry therapist and a certified mentor, which means that I supervise people who are interested in training to be a poetry therapist. So first I wanted to go over what is poetry? What are some perceptions of what poetry is? So I have some quotes here that I will read to you. Poetry is a distinction must be made between that writing which enables us to hold on to life, even as we are clinging to old hurts and wounds, and that writing which offers to us a space where we are able to confront reality in such a way that we live more fully. Such writing is not an anchor that we mistakenly cling to so as not to drown. It is writing that truly rescues, that enables us to reach the shore, to recover. Poetry brings unconscious forces into consciousness to make them understandable. It provides an outlet for emotions. Poetic language honors our polarities. We use language of poetry to provide the many levels of feelings, facets of knowing, and simultaneously so we can examine them and move forward. This last quote is actually from a client that I worked with using poetry therapy. This client says, I believe poetry is beautiful and can heal a person in many ways, physically and emotionally. It makes me feel good. I love words and fashioning them into something lovely. Poetry can be written from the heart and mind. You can express your thoughts and feelings in ways that you could not otherwise accomplish. It can heal your mind and body. Poetry is something we can all do, and you get better through practice. Poetry can be good therapy, and you can write about anything when you write poetry. Poetry is like a shining, guiding light in your mind. It feeds the soul. It's a work of art. Poetry is the essence of life. I always like incorporating that quote. So now that we kind of have an understanding of what poetry is, what is poetry therapy? So poetry therapy is the use of language, symbol, and story in therapeutic, educational, growth, and community building capacities. So what that means is it's using poems, it's using quotes, it's using stories, song lyrics, imagery, metaphor, even things like, newspaper headlines. You can use comics, you can really use anything. And that's going to help facilitate this personal growth, healing, and greater self-awareness. Besides the actual words that is being said, it is also what is not being said. It's that underlying meaning. It's what's in between the lines. Something to keep in mind is poetry therapy is not, it's not like a cure. It's not the treatment. It is used in part of a clinical treatment. You might be familiar with bibliotherapy or heard of bibliotherapy or narrative therapy or journal writing. So all of those are kind of all within the realm of poetry therapy. It is the purposeful, intentional use of cathartic, reflective process and or the integrative writing to further therapeutic goals. That is a quote by Kathleen Adams, who is also in the poetry therapy and journal writing community. So you might be a little bit more familiar with bibliotherapy. Bibliotherapy, it literally means books, books or literature to serve or help medically. So poetry therapy is part of bibliotherapy. They're kind of all related. The little bit of a difference is that poetry therapy uses more metaphor and imagery, rhythm, and other poetic devices compared to just plain books and literature. I have a little bit of a history here. So the term bibliotherapy was first used in 1916. And it was used by librarians who understood the value, and then they started to select books and kind of prescribe them to people. The early use of the term specified the use of informational books, as well as some selected imaginative novels whose characters served as models or warnings to the reader. The process did not include planned discussions of the reader's personal reaction to the material. With poetry therapy now, there is that interaction aspect to it and that dialogue, and that is called the interactive process. And I have that it was later identified as the interactive process in the 1960s. So what the interactive process is, if you can follow this, basically instead of the teacher being the center focus and giving out the information, the literature is the center of the conversations. So everything kind of goes around the literature in poetry therapy compared to when the teacher. Okay, I know it's a little bit confusing. In poetry therapy, the participant's reaction and subjective communication with the literature, as well as with the self and others about their felt experience. That is what is paramount and the cornerstone of the healing power. Okay, that is what makes it therapeutic, that interactive process. It's not just reading. It's really getting involved and exploring each piece. So some of the sequences when you're doing this work is recognition. So basically first you're identifying the theme within the group. What does the group need? Then you're going to examine, you're going to deepen that connection. You're going to interact. You're going to ask questions. Who, what, where, when, and all sorts of questions to kind of get participants involved and understanding what the literature is all about. Then you're going to start comparing things, holding of opposites, acknowledging those opposite things, shifting that awareness, expanding. And of course, application to the self, where you start evaluating, integrating, and carrying forth and finding action steps. So there is a model that is used. It's called the RES model. This was developed by Nicholas Mazza, who is the current president of the National Association for Poetry Therapy. So what the RES model is the R is receptive and prescriptive. That is using pre-existing poetry or literature that inspires this interactive process. Then there's the expressive creative part, which is using the writing for the client's personal expression. And that happens by giving prompts. Prompts can be verbal and they can also be written. They can be both. The symbolic ceremonial aspect is the talking about the metaphor part, having a ritual, meaning having good structure. And storytelling is a therapeutic tool to enrich these kinds of connections. So just a little bit of history. So this is not something new. Not many people have heard of poetry therapy, but it has been around quite a long time, all the way back when we used to have shamans and the witch doctors, and they chanted poetry for well-being. of the tribe or an individual. It's also been documented as far back as the 4th millennium of BCE in ancient Egypt, where words were actually written down and dissolved into solutions so that they could be physically ingested. And the patient would then take effect. So they ingested it so it could take effect as quickly as possible. That was the belief. Also historically, the first poetry therapist on record was a Roman physician in the 1st century AD who prescribed tragedy for his manic patients and comedy for those who were depressed. And Pennsylvania Hospital is the first hospital in the US to provide treatments using poetry narrative writing. If you do some searches, or if you even join the National Association for Poetry Therapy, you can have access to the journal where there are tons and tons of research articles about the uses of poetry therapy. So overall, some cognitive and psychological goals and benefits. I just wanted to go over this a little bit. It can increase emotional and cognitive awareness. It improves ability to analyze and understand situations to better problem solve and cope. It enhances and utilizes and helps you to utilize your coping skills. It helps to integrate the self and your experiences, helps to improve reality orientation, repair distorted thinking patterns, validates feelings, experiences, sense of self and identity. With social and physical goals and benefits, helps to improve communication skills, improve interpersonal skills, including awareness of other people's feelings, responses, and awareness of other people's existence and experiences. It improves making connections with others. And it also positively affects heart rate, blood pressure, and immune system, which is quite interesting, and reduces stress and restores equilibrium, emotional equilibrium. So as you can see, there are lots of really good benefits. So some goals and benefits for the self, that it can enhance self-discovery and self-understanding, shape and define a sense of identity and self-image, improve sense of worth and well-being, encourage and assist with expression, helps to process thoughts, feelings, experiences, helps with problem solving and decision making, and overall increases a sense of confidence and control. So what does all that mean? How do we use this? How do we use this information and this strategy, poetry therapy, with people who have BFRBs? And today we're talking about skin picking. So first, the process begins with selecting a piece of writing. So depending on what you are working on, what's on your mind, what's going on in your life, the person that's working with you, or if you're trying this on your own, that's something just to think about. Picking a piece of literature that really speaks to you and what you're going through in that moment. Then you're going to develop a plan of how you're going to use that. So thinking about what's the objective? What are your methods? In poetry therapy, in group work, especially, we always have a warm-up, a body, the main part of the workshop, and working with the poem, and then a closing. Recognition is reading the chosen material out loud, and then allowing them, participants in a group, to also read silently. If you're doing this one-on-one, same thing, try to read it out loud, and also read it silently. The engagement is a really important part of this stage, because you want to really explore the material, dialogue, talk it out loud. What is the poem saying? What is your reaction to it? How are you relating to it or not relating to it? And really start exploring. I always like to encourage people to explore verbally first, and then you would be exploring through writing, through prompts. After you've explored both talking it out and writing it out, then you share that. You examine those personal responses. So that process is what leads to growth and understanding and healing. So I've listed here some potential topics of poems that could be used when working with managing your skin picking. These are just some. The list can be endless, but I thought these were some important ones and ones that I've worked with folks. So just to give a couple of examples, we have topics such as identifying, understanding, accepting emotions. And by the way, if any of these topics speak to you, these are good topics to search for. If you're looking for poems, you can search for poems all over the internet, and you can type in a topic and you can find and see if something on this topic speaks to you. Emotion regulation, cognitive distortion and perceptions, mindfulness, body image, guilt and shame, loneliness, isolation, control, obstacles and barriers, boundaries and limit setting, avoidance and procrastination, worry and anxiety, depression, coping, self-care, how to utilize supports, gratitude, self-esteem, values, connecting with the self, others, and your environment, and the self versus society. Just putting it out there, some potential topics to think about. So I have a couple of example poems here that I wanted to share with you. And I'm not expecting you to write on these example poems, but if any of them call out to you, speak to you, certainly jot down the name of the poem and perhaps the prompt, so you can write later on. Again, when working with poems, it would be more than here's the poem, here's the prompt. We would have a warm-up exercise. We talk about it, kind of introduce the topic. We would read the poem. We talk about the poem, and then I would introduce the prompt, and we'd write a little bit, and then we would share what you wrote and explore that, and then we would have a closing. So this first example poem is called Today I Asked My Body What She Needed by Holly Holden. Today I asked my body what she needed, which is a big deal considering my journey of not really asking that much. I thought she might need more water, or proteins, or greens, or yoga, or supplements, or movement. But as I stood in the shower reflecting on her stretch marks, her roundness where I would like flatness, her softness where I would prefer firmness, all those conditioned wishes that form a bundle of never quite rightness, she whispered very gently, "Could you just love me like this?" So some suggested prompts for this example poem would be to ask and answer what your body needs now. I find that that's a very important question to ask your body when you're having urges. What is the urge trying to tell you? What does it need right now? Have a dialogue with your body and identify what you love and appreciate about your body. Whenever we're doing writing as well with poetry therapy, and whenever I'm presenting prompts, it's important to keep in mind that if none of the prompts speak to you, then don't use them. Write about however the poem speaks to you, whatever comes to your mind. It's really important to understand that there is no right or wrong way of doing this. It's what feels good. So another example, The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. This is a little bit more of a well-known poem. I don't know if you're familiar or not with it. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Potential prompts for this poem. How do you find peace in the wild thing? Right? What do you do to cope and relax? Can you sit and write in your favorite space that makes you feel calm and comfortable? Write about a beautiful and peaceful place that you have been to or want to go to, or even imagined, that can bring you peace and relaxation. Poem example number 3. Looking Glass by Denise Levertov. I slide my face along to the mirror, sideways, to see that side smile, a pale look, tired and sly. Hey, who is glancing there? Shadow me, not with malice, but mercurially, shot with foreknowledge of dread and sweat. Potential prompts. I know that mirrors are really big triggers for a lot of people. So I thought this was a really good example of looking at yourself in the mirror. Look at yourself in the mirror and notice all of those self-judgments that do come up. Can you turn off your inner critic and have self-compassion? Have kindness and empathy. Do not be hard on yourself and practice acceptance. You are doing what you can in this moment. Write about what you see when you look in the mirror and what you can tell yourself. How can you rephrase those judgments? So as you see in this prompt, there's a lot of different strategies that we use in treating BFRBs, but it's presented in a different way, in a more creative way. And another example, 100 Objects Close by Mira Mirabai. I know a cure for sadness. Let your hands touch something that make your eyes smile. I bet there are 100 objects close by that can do that. Look at beauty's gift to us. Her power is so great. She enlivens the earth, the sky, our soul. Possible prompts to consider. Breathe and stretch, always a good reminder. And look around the room and just notice the things that are around you. What makes you happy? Can you make a list of 100? If 100 is too much, a list of 50, a list of 10. Start your writing with, I know a cure for blank. So you can fill that in with whatever you're feeling in that moment. Or you can use the actual line in the poem, I know a cure for sadness, right? And what is that cure? What is that for you? So that's just a couple of examples. I hope that you get a little bit of a feeling about what it's all about. I wanted to take some time for us to actually practice it. So as I said, when you're working with poetry therapy, you always start with a warm up. So the warm up that we're going to do for today, and again, we're not sharing this because this is a webinar. So this is for you. So don't worry about it. Again, there's no right or wrong. You can write it down. You can think about it. But what I want you to consider is an acrostic. So an acrostic is where you write a word down the side of your paper, and then you use each letter to start another word or a sentence. So I challenge you to use the word feelings, or you can choose a feeling, maybe something you're feeling right now, you know, anxious, excited, calm, whatever feeling it is, write that down your paper. And then with each letter, use that to start a word of your own, whatever comes to you, or a sentence. So I do want you to try to do this on your own. So maybe take like 2 minutes and see what happens. Okay. As you're wrapping up what you wrote, normally in a group, what we would do is we would share and just kind of go over, whoever wanted to share, what they wrote for their warm-up exercise. Excuse me, that's a nice way to just get started on the topic of the group. So next we move on to our poem. So I chose this poem for us to use to practice. I really love this poem. I think it really speaks to a lot of emotions that we all feel, and oftentimes struggle with managing. So this is called The Guest House by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So again, normally in a group, we would have the opportunity to talk about this poem. I would be asking you questions like, what do you think about it? Can you relate? Is there something that stands out to you in this poem? Do you agree? Do you disagree? How does this sit with you? Right. And we would have a brief discussion about it and hear what everyone has to say. And then after we have a brief discussion, I would then present you with the main course or the main prompts. So for us today, I want you to think about using any of these prompts, or again, if something else comes to your mind from reading that poem, write about that. So some possible prompts, and yes, you are going to write on your own right now. Usually I would say we'd write for like 10 minutes, but maybe we'll just write for 5 or so. What emotions are in your guest house? How do you cope with these emotions? What do you want to tell these emotions? Have a dialogue with one of the guest emotions. So take about 5 minutes and see what happens. See if any of these prompts inspire you. You do not have to write on all of these prompts. Okay, pick one, pick whatever one calls to you, or again, write about something that the poem, however the poem inspires you. Okay, so we'll do that for about 5 minutes. Okay, and I will turn off my video just so I'm not like looming over you as you're writing. And while you're writing, by the way, have fun, right? Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about grammar. Again, this is all for you. So enjoy it. start to wrap up your thoughts. If you did not finish, which you probably didn't because 5 minutes is not that long a time, please go back to it. Go back to it later. Usually during a group, again, I would probably say like 10 minutes for writing, depending on what's going on in the group. Okay. But I do hope that you enjoyed this sample and this practice here. So normally what we would do is we would be sharing now. We would talk, what was this like for you? What came up for you? Do you want to share what you wrote, or what did you discover from your writing? I don't always ask people to share because not everyone wants to share. So if you don't share your writing, maybe we just talk about what that process was like. What did you learn? What did you struggle with? What did you like? What did you not like? Okay. I see that there is a raised hand, but I'll take questions at the very end. Okay. What I want to do is, again, if we were doing this in a workshop, we would have a closing. Okay. And a closing is always important to do because a lot of stuff comes up in talking in groups and even in individual work. So you want to make sure everything is kind of tied as neatly as possible at the end. So for our closing or dessert, I want you to take a moment to give thanks to your emotion, your visitor. So actually tell yourself, thank you. Thank you for that feeling, right? Thank you, self, for having that feeling. Thank you for coming. And think about, what did your emotion visitor teach you? What did you learn from that feeling and experience? What will you remind yourself of for next time the emotion visits you? Okay. Things to think about. Closing writing is usually very brief. Sometimes I do closings, we write our closings. Sometimes we verbally do closings. Sometimes if it's virtual, we write it in the chat, right? Like a one-word summary of what you learned. So maybe take like 1 minute, half a minute, just to think about this. Okay, give thanks to your emotion. What did that emotion teach you? What did you learn from that feeling, that experience? What will you remind yourself of for next time that emotion comes up? Okay. I hope that this mini practice session was interesting and you enjoyed it and you learned from it and you got a little bit of a taste of what poetry therapy is and how you can use it with skin picking. I wanted to share, I did a workshop and a closing that I did in that workshop, working with folks with BFRBs, is we used this quote to start off our closing. So I just wanted to share this as an example. I thought it was a really powerful quote. And what we did as a closing in that situation is we did a collaborative poem where people in the group all contributed a line. Okay, so that's a really powerful technique. And I really love that technique. It's a nice way to really involve everyone. So the quote, my mission, should I choose to accept it, is to find peace with exactly who and what I am. Take pride in my thoughts, my appearance, my talents, my flaws, and to stop this incessant worrying that I can't be loved as I am. So our closing was to complete the sentence, my mission, should I choose to accept it. All right, we use the first line in this quote to start our own poem. So my mission, should I choose to accept it, is to be confident in myself by believing in myself and loving myself. My mission is to accept my body size, myself, and the idea that perfection does not exist. My mission is to accept myself with love and compassion, leave out criticism. My mission is to speak my mind with confidence and don't second guess my inner voice. My mission is to love myself the way I needed to be loved as a child, to create, to give myself grace and know that I am enough. My mission is to replace the loop of unnecessary thoughts with approval and wisdom. My mission to be, my mission to be gentle with myself when my BFRB is hard and I know I'm doing my best, and to love myself unconditionally. My mission is to stop comparing myself to others and avoid measuring my success and self-worth based on opinions of others. I want to feel validated by myself and no one else. My mission is to provide myself with as much self-care as the amount of care I provide others. My mission is to be kind to myself when I have bad days with my trick and be positive about the future. My mission is to stop bullying myself and being mean to myself. Just because it happened to me before doesn't mean I deserve incessant bullying. My mission is to choose to be me, fearlessly and determinedly me, without excuse, living this beautiful life fully and not center my thoughts on what others call my imperfections. Okay. So I want to open it up now for questions. Okay, so I know I saw briefly there was a hand raised. Maybe if you write it in the question answer section, I can try to answer. If you don't want to ask here, feel free to email me, Laura Santner, lcsw@gmail.com. I'm a therapist and a poetry therapist, and the therapist lead for Trick Stop and Skin Pick is Vladimir. You can email him as well. Let me see if I could figure out the hands being raised. It's kind of a long list of folks, so I'm not quite sure how to call on people. Oh, here we go. I see. Yes, so if you hold on a second, sorry. So the question is, are there any existing online groups you know of that are doing poetry therapy for BFRBs? Good question. And the answer is no, I am the only one. At least the only one that I am aware of. I'm currently not doing any groups specifically for BFRBs, but if there is a demand, if people email me and are interested, I will form one. I would be happy to do so. Someone think you were easy to follow, very helpful. Oh, I wish I could have watched the whole thing. So I did record this. So it will be available for you to watch again. I'm not sure when or how that happens, but it happens. Okay. Someone commented that they want to learn more about it. And it's definitely a powerful way to heal. Yes, absolutely. You can learn more about poetry therapy by going to www.poetrytherapy.org. just gives a little bit more information about poetry therapy and the uses. And people who are certified use it for all different populations. Okay. Just reading some of the questions answers. So I tend to pick when I feel pimples, but not in mirrors. Yep. So there are many, many strategies. So this question is, this person is picking at pimples, but feeling, right? The texture, the bumps, the unevenness, not looking at mirrors. So how do I stop myself when wearing shorts? They feel embarrassed when I am with someone right on bed because they are in my hidden spots. So again, so poetry therapy is one technique, one strategy to use. There are many, and there is not one strategy only that's going to help. You kind of want to do a combination of things. So that question, I'll answer it, but it's not quite on the topic of poetry therapy and BFRBs. But there are many, many strategies. So for example, different kind of barrier strategies you might want to implement. Even if you're wearing shorts, maybe you want to wear some stockings. Maybe you want to work on the texture by making sure you have lotion on, having lotion handy. If you are in bed and wearing shorts, I suggest kind of things like barriers, like putting gloves on, covering your hands. And if you're doing some writing or journaling at night, that could also be triggering. So if you're doing writing and journaling, maybe have some gloves on while you're writing and journaling. If you do have exposed skin, that's going to be tempting to you. Oh, good. And I hope I'm answering these questions. Okay. Another person is saying that they're very passionate already about poetry. So this gives them many ideas on how to work with poems. Excellent, exciting. I'm really happy to hear that. Again, if questions come up, feel free to email me, or if you want suggestions, I'll do my best to answer. I think this is very helpful for my picking. It makes me aware of my feelings and why I picked. Yes, absolutely. Yes, agreed. I never tried writing my feelings. Maybe writing my feelings can help to distract myself. Yes, it's another way of processing. Feelings are big. Everyone has feelings, and it's sometimes hard to keep all those feelings sorted out in your head. So just writing them out, just getting it out and seeing it on paper, and that process is really helpful. And you never know what's going to come out. So when you start off with an intention of writing about one thing, it might lead you in a completely different direction that you didn't expect. And that's pretty neat when that happens. Okay. Let me double check. Other questions? I hope I didn't skip any. Thank you so much. So much to think about. Yes, and look into it from this. How accurate, helpful do you think it is to view skin picking as a type of OCD? Also, I saw boundaries and limit setting on the list of topics. Why is this especially important for those with BFRBs? Good question. So there was a previous workshop on BFRBs and OCD. So if you didn't get a chance to check that out, go look at that recording, and that kind of explains a little bit more about the differences. There are differences. I don't quite want to go into all of the details now because there was like maybe an hour webinar on that topic. So that does it a little bit more justice than how I can address it very quickly now. So I do suggest checking out that webinar. They are different. And yes, so I put boundaries and limit setting on the topic list. And that relates because, and actually, if you're already in the program, there is a whole session on boundaries, setting boundaries. So oftentimes we don't respect our own boundaries and we have difficulties limit setting. And then it's really puts us in an uncomfortable situation. You know, when you're presented with something that you don't actually want to do, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't feel good, it makes you uncomfortable. So understanding what your boundaries are and respecting that and knowing that that's okay. It's okay to have boundaries and it's okay to set limits. Yes, it's okay to push those boundaries and limit settings, but sometimes you have to respect it, and that's okay. So that's kind of how it relates to someone with a BFRB. If you need more clarification, add a follow-up question. If you had this later in the day, there could be, more people who are working earlier. Oh yeah, vinyl gloves are very helpful. Yep. So I think this comment is related to the time that this webinar was presented today. So people who join these webinars are all over the world, which is pretty cool, actually. So it's really hard to pick a time that works for everyone. So in order to accommodate that, we do try to have the monthly webinars at slightly different times, but they are all recorded. So if you are unable to join live for a webinar, you can go and look at some of the recordings. So you can still get the information. Other questions? Questions, comments? I'll wait another minute to see if anything else comes through. Okay. All right. I think we might be done with the questions then. So again, I really hope that you found this helpful. And if something comes up later on, feel free to email either me or Vladimir and we'll answer the best you can. Okay. And if you have suggestions for future topics and ideas, I know usually there is a survey in the beginning to do that, but I don't know how to do that. So, so email Vladimir if you have ideas and suggestions for future topics. If you'd like me to do this again, I can certainly bring it back. I can certainly bring it back at a different day, different time. Let him know what you would like. If you want an actual workshop, we can think about either doing it through skinpick.com or through me privately. So things to think about. And I hope you all enjoyed this. And thank you so much for joining and participating. Okay, stop the screen share and hope everyone has a good week. Oh, wait, there's one more. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed this. I got a nice comment at the end. Thank you so much and have a good night. Okay, take care.